You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast, and this week we're doing something a little different. So we are doing our set review, preview, whatever for MH2, but we've broken it down into two parts.
MH3.
Or three, sorry, MH3. There's been too many of them. So first part is our traditional look. Mm-hmm. More like, here's our Goldilocks set, although for this one, everything felt so hyped, we just said, forget that, we're not going to pick one at each, we're just going to pick 3 cards and go from there. And then, go ahead.
To step in also, we just had leaks on leaks, right? So yeah. It was hard to put this all together in the format that we usually like to, because we had so many leaks, we didn't know what was real, and it forced WotC's hand to start putting out information earlier than we had anticipated with our schedule. Moreover, it was difficult for us to kind of, as you were saying, everything was so hyped. Because of a lot of the leaks, it seemed like every card that was spoiled, everybody was hyped for, so it was just difficult to kind of parse out.
Yeah. So. And then second part, next week, we'll actually go over what we think this means for Magic on the whole. So with that, we have our Goldilocks sampling. So let's get it taken away.
Okay. So the way we kind of approached this was because we're so late in the cycle and because everything seemed to be so hype and because of the problems with the leaks, what was real, what wasn't, we basically aren't going to go through with the appropriate over or under if we didn't feel like we could. We just wanted to address a couple of cards that we liked in this set overall that might be getting a little too much hype, a little under hype, etc., right? So I'll kick it off real quick. And for me, the card I want to talk about first is Flage, Titan of Fire's Fury. For anybody that paid attention during spoiler season, this is a card that kind of came and went. Everybody went, oh, this thing looks great, and then they moved on to the next card, which is kind of the problem with the set overall. Aside from the cards that were spoiled early, everything just kind of hit and we were on to the next thing because WotC had to just spew spoilers early. But Flage, Titan of Fire's Fury, is 1 and a red or a green for a 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it escapes. So it's just like Uro and Kroxa. Red and a white. Red and a white. It's a Boros god. A giant, I should say. And then it has additional text. Whenever Flage enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage to any target and you gain 3 life. So like Kroxa and like Uro before, it has an ETB and attack trigger, and that trigger is Lightning Helix. This costs the same as the other 2 and escapes for the same. 2 red, 2 white, exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. When this card hit, I thought, oh, this is actually going to be really good if there's a deck that kind of exists around it. And similarly, people weren't really interested in this card for like a quick minute, and then the hype died down. There were a lot of people that are just like, oh, this is going to be great in Modern Burn, not actually understanding what that deck was. And then that was about the interest. It wasn't like, we're going to see this in the Modern format. We're going to see this in this deck or that deck. The hype was there for a minute and then gone. And when I read this, I thought this was going to be a mid to late game finisher for a deck that didn't quite exist yet. And because of that, I didn't really see this having a place in Modern. I thought this would just kind of exist in Commander and fart around there for a while. Now we're actually seeing this in brand new decks in Modern. There's a Jeskai Energy control list that takes advantage of Flage, and there are a couple other additional lists that use Flage in combination with another card I'll talk about later to make really good use of the Lightning Helix trigger, effectively draining and gaining for 6, which is incredible on a card like this in Modern, the way things are right now. And that's kind of why I think the hype on Flage is appropriate. It's really good in the Jeskai shell and then this other shell. What happens in the future, I don't know, but people aren't clamoring over themselves to get copies of Flage the same way they are cards like Nadu and Nethergoyf and Necro Dominance, because all those cards are broken in ways that it's difficult to explain. But right now, everybody's focusing on that kind of stuff. They're not focusing on Flage. If the format doesn't see a ban, we just kind of see it float along as is, Ruby Storm picks up, then Flage just kind of exists in this deck. I don't see it being some kind of overlord and commander. I think it's good. It's a perfectly cromulent commander itself because it is a legendary Elder Giant. Cool. That means it fits in Giant Tribal. And Ancient Amphitheater, the land from Shadowmoor, the tribal land, is Boros, and it's a giant land. Cool. So it fits in that type, in that kin, whatever you want to call it. I think it has some cool homes overall. I don't think it's oppressive. I don't think it's a card you need to just go out and buy at $30. We can wait until the set is opened more, and thus I think the hype on this card is appropriate. I just don't think the dollar value is when you really break it down.
Yeah. I think that's, and one of the things I saw when I saw this card was, man, this is very efficient. It does exactly what you would expect.
Yeah.
There might be a home for it, but Modern Burn, which is the first thing everyone cited, was not the home. Ooh. And I think that, obviously Uro has kind of elevated the stature of any card with escape at this point, and Kroxa after it. Yeah. And who knows, maybe there's some like Mardu shenanigans list out there that's just all escape dudes. But I also did not think this had an extant home in the format. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until now we're seeing these lists that come out. I'm like, okay, now it makes sense. Now we're seeing people brew with this. Now that Energy actually has support in a set with impactful cards.
Yep.
That are designed for eternal formats.
Yeah, which means you can take the time and spew off a bunch of spells to make Flage work. Tune the whatever it is. I keep wanting to call it Tune the Band. That's something else. Not Deep Analysis. Tune the Narrative.
Oh yeah.
For those that are wondering, I have like an MH3 pre-release kit down here. It's on the top of the stack because I want to move it out. But that card just. You draw extra cards. You draw, what is it, like one or two? You get some
one
energy.
And you get an energy. Yeah,
cool.
It's fixed. What was the Glimmer? The 4-mana one. Yeah. Draw 2. Yeah. No, this is better than that. I think. So there's support for energy.
Yeah, you do a lot of that. You do a lot of fiddle farting with your hand, a lot of sculpting. That means you're going to put a lot of cards in the graveyard that aren't just lands pretty quickly to escape Flage and turn the corner a lot earlier than you were before. And I think it's really good. I think you brought up Uro. I think that card's over the top. And I retweeted.
I just think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No.
I was saying I just think that Uro being as powerful as it has, any card that reads Escape and has an ETB effect will automatically get hyped. It's just going to happen. In this case, I think they did a good job of designing it, though.
I agree. 2 points. I retweeted something Arilac said a couple of weeks ago when testing with Naidu began, and it's that 1 green blue as a mana value deserves a jersey in the rafters. It needs to be retired next to Phyrexian mana symbol.
Yeah.
Because Nadu, Uro, Oko, right? These are all ridiculous cards. And when you see a card like Escape, like the point you're making is like you're going to compare it to Uro because of how powerful that could be.
Yeah.
I think that bar might be a little too high, and you compare it against Kroxa. And if the card is better than Kroxa, then you're probably going to play it.
Yeah.
Which is sad because Kroxa is a really good card, but to nug somebody for 6 or whatever it is, you have to spend so many resources to run them out of cards in hand.
Yeah.
And Flage just does it off the top. It just hits for 3. Like, this should have been the Kroxa that we got. Instead, we have the Kroxa that we received. The Kroxa we need versus the Kroxa we deserve, whatever that quote from Batman is. And so
he's the Aaron Eckhart.
Yeah. So like, if you want to look at Flage like that, then maybe it is, I think, still appropriately hyped because it is like the next best Elder Giant like this, not Kroxa. Yeah. And so you can, maybe this becomes the bar we compare the rest of the Elder Giants to. But we spent a lot of time talking about Flage.
Yeah. Sorry.
What do you got?
I got Vexing Bauble.
All right.
1 colorless, whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. The rest of the card doesn't matter. It just cantrips, sack it, draw, whatever. This card's not that good. It's not. It is incredibly narrow. Sure, it stops forces. It doesn't stop scepters. It doesn't stop anything that copies. So like Storm doesn't stop that. And people were thinking that this was like the new sideboard tech. And I am sorry, it is just not. It is narrow. It is symmetrical, which is even worse.
Yeah, That's a problem for a lot of people.
Because, yeah, like if I'm running some storm-based list, I probably have Force of Vigor or some force to protect myself. I need to be able to cast that.
Yes.
I need to be able to cast that. This stops it. It saw a pretty big wave of hype when it was first spoiled by people saying it'll make its way to Vintage and to Legacy. And I'm like, no, that's the people that said that clearly don't follow those formats. It's not that good. And a $3 uncommon for something that will be incredibly bad sideboard tech. I mean, this is like me sideboarding Back to Nature and Jund because there was so much Bogles locally. It's not, you don't want to be in a position to have to use this card. It is not good. It is not going to see play that widespread. I don't think you're going to see play in EDH, casual or otherwise. I think this is going to live in bulk bins forever, even at 1 mana. It's just not that good. I'm sorry.
Everything you're saying, I agree with. If based on personal experience playing against it, based on conversations I've had with people, and based on experiences I have secondhand from people who are currently brewing with this. The general population of Legacy players on Dimir, Scam, or Rescaminator, those are 2 different decks, and the Sneak and Show community basically spent a lot of time trying to figure out Vexing Bubble. I think the Scam and Rescaminator communities are just saying, whatever, we'll deal with it when we see it. We have counter spells for a reason. Yep. The Sneak and Show community was a little more concerned about it, but that deck offers a little more flexibility, and you can actually play it in that deck. But there's an important thing here. When you look at a deck like Sneak and Show, well, you're looking at best a tier 2 deck, not a tier 1 deck.
Yeah.
And so when you recognize what decks can actually make use of this card, they're not tier 1 decks. The Mono Brown combo decks, the Mystic Forge combo, if you want to call it that can play this card instead of main deck Defense Grid. But that's not a tier 1 deck. There's the Echo of Aeons combo deck, basically the exact same thing as Mystic Forge combo, but with Echo, that can also play this card and is not tier 1. A deck like Goblins can sideboard in Vexing Bauble and sideboard out Aether Vials. It can sideboard in, I can never remember the name of the flute as well.
Man.
It's got Flash, it's Drannith Magistrate, and Sorcerer Spyglass, all in one. Right? It can sideboard that in, but that is not a tier 1 deck. So this is like a tier 2 card in Legacy right now, the way the format is shaped. And we'll kind of see what happens after that. And then in Vintage, it is a really weird operand in Vintage where I've been saying for a couple weeks, I would love if Vexing Bauble took the Mishra's Workshop archetype and split it into multiple different archetypes like we used to have. For those who used to play Vintage and understand the terms Prison and Espresso stacks and understand the difference between those two, that's the kind of sharding I want to see with this, but that's not really what we're seeing right now. Yeah. I think this card is best in Vintage, yes, and fucking of course, right? The format is full of zeros, but I think it's only really good in Lurrus decks because you can toggle your own bauble.
Yeah.
You sack it in your opponent's end step, you draw a card, you play out your zeros, you play it back. Cool. You just lock the game in that kind of way because Lurrus decks were already looking to effectively cycle Dress Downs, which are a little more dangerous of a game plan than Vexing Bauble when you're looking for cards to cycle like that. And there's a lot more that then goes into, well, how do you brew Lurrus? What cards are you playing? Blah, 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 blah. And it reshapes that format. This does have the opportunity to make, lands better and worse, but that deck didn't care about counter spells to begin with. And so you have a lot of questions on Legacy of what archetype actually wants this in the main deck? And then to your point, I don't think there are many, if any at all. It's all sideboard options.
Yeah.
The end. You also, and this is a fun caveat, if you're on Death and Taxes and you play Vexing Bauble and then you play Thalia and I have to pay 1 colorless mana for my Lotus Petal, it is not countered because that 1 colorless tax counts. Yep. So you have that opportunity to muck this card up yourself too. And I don't think a lot of players realized that at the time. It is just part of how this card works. When it comes to Modern, maybe this makes Taxes decks viable, but at the this seems like a card that was printed for an era of Modern that existed when Leyline of the Guild Pack was released
Yep.
with, what was it, OTJ, and Rhinos ruled the roost. This
Yeah.
seems like WotC saying, we don't want Cascade decks in Modern anymore. And here you have Bauble. Damping Sphere wasn't good enough, we gave you this. Like, cool, but those decks are bad right now. So
Yeah.
we need to see a metagame shift for those decks to become good again to make this card worthwhile. So at the moment, to your point, $3, no thank you. I held up the 4 copies that I had just in case. Like, I bought... I don't know what happened on TCG Player, but my first set went to a completely different state, and
Yeah.
I needed 4 more because I'm just whole ass brewing in Legacy, so I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to have them available. And am I sad that I paid like the $2 or $3 and change for them at the moment? No, because they could have been useful and like made me that in store credit. Am I upset in the long run that I'll pay that much when these really truly kind of do nothing for the next couple of years? Yeah, a little bit, but I'm not going to feel it because I didn't spec on this card. I think, like you said, I agree. I think it was entirely overhyped because people were so hyper focused on what Modern and Legacy and Vintage looked like when this card was spoiled before we had the rest of the set and people beginning to experiment, that they just lost their damn minds.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And they thought this card was just going to warp the format. I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
What you got next?
All right, my next card is the one that works with Flage, the one I alluded to before, and it is Arena of Glory. It is from the rare land cycle in Modern Horizons 3. So it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain. It taps to add a red, and then it has an activated ability. A red, tap it, exert Arena of Glory so it will not untap it on your next turn. Add 2 red mana to your mana pool. If that mana is spent on a creature spell, it gains haste until end of turn. So first, you get 2 red mana that does not have to be spent on the same creature. It can be spent on 2 creatures, and then they both have haste. Now, this is a card that really we heard nothing about during spoiler season because 2 of the other lands overshadowed them. The black land, which has Connive, and the green one, which copies stuff from your graveyard.
I believe so, yeah.
This card really didn't pick up hype overall until people started escaping Flage with this. And because of where we are now in the cycle with this card and the decks that we're seeing this in, I think this card is absolutely overhyped. I think it is going to be good in the long run, but I just think right now people are way too high on this card. It is the most efficient way to give at least 1 creature haste via a land on a single turn. Giving 2 creatures haste, however, makes it the most efficient. And we're basically looking at like Hanwar Battlements, I believe, not Garrison, one or the other.
Yeah, Battlements is the one.
Yeah,
it's the one that Amulet runs.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Is it like 1, it's like a red and tap it, and then you give a creature haste, right?
Something like that, yeah. I think maybe red and white, but yeah.
Yeah. No, that's the one from Innistrad that gives a double strike.
Oh, right, yes.
Right. And also first strike and haste, then the one from Rav gives it double strike. Right? Mm-hmm. The Titan lands are a maze unto themselves. But Hanwar Battlements is what people did use in Titan to give Titan haste. And this is more efficient because it can give 2 creatures haste. It requires just 2 lands tapping on this turn, but it will lock down the land on the following turn. So you still require to escape Flage, you still need a red source, and Arena, and then 2 white. So it still takes 4 mana to escape Flage. But the thing is, you gain the 6-point drain and gain. But that's it. That's all people are really caring about right now. It's just how this works with Flage, not how this works overall in the Modern format. And they are experimenting with Flage outside of Jeskai control. It is in some just big Boros lists. It does do some work. Arena of Glory allows you to play a really interesting game overall. But this card is basically hitched to Flage. People have hitched their carts to Flage when it comes to Arena of Glory, and in the long run, I don't think that's going to be necessary, and I don't think it's going to like float the price at $1.50. That's really cheap compared to some of the other lands in this cycle, but at the end of the day, I think this is just going to be a bulk land because it is a redundant effect in Commander. It will not untap the next turn, despite the fact that you could give 2 creatures haste with this, but it is just another cog in the machine for finding a way to give your creatures haste and not your opponent's creatures haste. So this card overall, I see as being overhyped.
Yeah, this is one that it's just not efficient enough for me to really care. You're still spending 2 mana for the effect, so you're not gaining any mana there. Like, yeah, you do get haste, and it does see a little bit of play with Flage. But I don't see where, outside of its interaction with one card from the same set it's in, where it is necessarily an improvement on stuff that we already have in the format, i.e. anything in Arena, or anything in Amulet Titan, anything like that. And I just don't, like, this is a bulk land to me. It's going to sit there, and I'll find it in a box one day and remember that time that they released a bad land in a set. Cool. That's the story for this card for me. It just doesn't have that lifespan to it.
Nope.
It just doesn't.
There is the possibility that this does go in Amulet because... So the reason this card is more efficient, and I needed to check battlements just to make sure, is that you tap 2 lands, you get 2 mana. Hanwar battlements, you tap 2 lands, you get 1 mana. So it is just more efficient, right?
Fair, yeah.
So it's not... you still give 1... You can give 2 creatures haste, but you get 2 mana for your 2 tap lands. That's the efficiency loop here. And because you can juggle lands in Titan, you have the ability to just skip the exert part of it by picking it back up on the following turn or later that turn to rehaste a Titan if you were using battlements in your list. If you weren't and you were using the Innistrad land and in conjunction with the original Rav land for haste, first strike, and then double strike, I think Arena of Glory is just unnecessary. People were using battlements in Titan instead of the Innistrad land for reasons that weren't just mana efficiency, and I don't quite know why, so I can't really speak to that. I have Dom Harvey's manifesto on Titan that I have not read yet. I'm sure it's in there about one or the other in a given meta, and Arena of Glory might show up in there as well. But regardless of how well Titan does in the modern format, regardless of how well Flage does in the modern format, this isn't the kind of card that deserves this much hype because it's not going to change the format at all. It's just going to, I think it's going to come and go. And how many people honestly care about lands that give their creatures haste in modern outside of Amulet players? It is, prior to this set, like a literal 0. Nothing. Nobody cared about that. Only the Amulet players. When you look at Commander, that's a different story. I did not run the numbers on Battlement to see what's going on there, but if I had to guess, not that many people care because there are enchantment-based ways to do this that are just about as hardy, if not a little more hardy, at most tables. Lands aren't too vulnerable, but Strip Mine and Wasteland are fairly affordable. Field of Ruin, Ghost Quarter, you name it. There's
a million ways to do that now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, for me, this card, overhyped.
My card is Tameo Inquisitive Student. 1 blue for a 0/3. Flying. Whenever it attacks, investigate. When you draw your 3rd card in a turn, exile it and turn it over to a blank piece of paper. Its second half, which is effectively a blank piece of paper, starts with 2 loyalty, +2 Lily of the Last Hope, something that's -1, -0. -3, regrow an instant or sorcery. If it's green, add a mana of any color. Number 7, and its alt is -7, draw cards equal to half your library, rounded down. Or rounded up, sorry, and you get an emblem with no maximum hand size. That second half doesn't matter. That first half is good.
Yes.
Except for the last part of text on the card. When you draw your 3rd card in a turn, exile it, then return it. Not you may.
It is, yeah.
It is mandatory. I get it. When it attacks, you investigate. It doesn't do any damage. You're getting a free investigate. Fine. No one's going to block it. There's no damage, and they know you're never going to transform it until you're going off or something. I don't know. This card just doesn't seem that good. It seems good in formats where you have a small deck with a lot of fast mana, so maybe Vintage? I don't necessarily know that it slides into any of the Storm lists there, though, and that's the only thing I can see it going into, really.
Yeah,
it's
you have
just
to
not.
pay for the spells. So
Yeah, like you have to pay for the spells, and you have to pay to invest. Like, it's just not good. And this is currently the borderless foil version is the second most expensive card in the set as of time of recording, behind the borderless textured foil Ulamog.
fair.
This card does not deserve that price point. I understand everyone would thought that the front side was insane. Some EDH content creators thought the second half was amazing. I question their sincerity in those statements because it's not. This card, outside of being Tamiyo, outside of being a legend, it is cool that it can be your commander in mono blue.
Yep.
But I don't know why you wouldn't just run Urza. I don't get it. I just don't get where the hype, where the appeal is. It's a great engine with no payoff, and the engine requires more investment other than this card because you have to pay mana to sack the clues when you investigate.
Yep.
It's mind-boggling. I don't understand the absolute furor around this card. Like, people were rabid when it first got posted, and then slowly people calmed down, and oh hey, no, it's like the first two like sections of text on the front, insane, terrible after that.
Yeah.
All bad.
Yeah. Everybody seemed really hyped that you could cast a brainstorm on the next turn and flip this into, and I think it was rightly quoted as, a blank piece of paper.
Yeah.
This does effectively nothing. I played against this card in Legacy 2 weeks ago out of a 4-color beans list, no black.
Oh.
And I will say, I was playing Rescaminator. Yeah. It was a 3-game set against beans, and I took games 2 and games 3. So I lost game 1, which is where I saw Tamiyo. Did I lose to Tamiyo? I want to say no. But the truth is that I did, but only because the one threat that I found in the entire game was grief. Every other threat I was able to manifest came out of my opponent's graveyard. I reanimated their Solitude, which is also a piddly-ass creature. When your grief and your Solitude are basically just keeping Tamiyo in check,
yeah,
it gets really good. And then your Beans opponent, who's just playing a land every turn and then draws half their library, is going to find Triumph of St. Catherine, and you have no removal game 1. Yeah, absolutely, hands down, crushed it, nailed it. A singular Bowmaster could have dealt with this card so much faster.
Yeah.
Because you have to draw 3 cards. And spoiler, when you have 3 toughness, if you brainstorm and I respond with my Bowmaster to try and flip your Tamiyo, it dead.
Yep.
Right? Then we have just the incidental damage over time. Sideboarding into Dothy Voidwalker or starting with Dothy Voidwalker in the main, Tamiyo is dead after it flips if I have another threat. It just is not a good enough card. I know it actually realistically is because both of them are 3/2s. Like, this card just does nothing right now and does not deserve the price point. I was excited, just like everybody else was. You're like, cool, draw 3 cards. That's really easy in every format this is available.
Yeah.
In. But then what does it do? And it's just kind of a whole lot of nothing.
Like, I kind of wish that when they spoiled it, they did it like Jace the Mind Sculptor, when they spoiled that and it was like puzzle pieces all over the place. So we had to gradually piece together what the back half of the card was, so we could be so excited for it and then just be floored with disappointment after it was all revealed.
I feel like they stopped doing Planeswalker reveals when they put in the 5-color Mishra in an unset, because they used to show the card art, the casting cost, the loyalty, and then there was a fog of war all over the card, and they would like remove a bit of the fog in various places so you could just read the abilities. And I think the distaste for that card at the end of the day turned them off from this. But, and I want to give a little bit of information, Tamiyo is the most expensive Planeswalker in the set. Sorin, House Markov, and Ral Moonsage are currently in winning Modern list. They are actively putting up 5-0s and still cost less than Tamiyo. One of them costs 1 mana, the other 2 cost 2, and at least you can flip Ral the first turn, and it is almost always going to win you the game that you play, when you can flip Ral that turn. Sorin, I don't know exactly which part of that card wins. I have not been paying attention to those lists, but I do know it is putting up really good results right now on Moto for Modern. Yep. Tamiyo, like I said, nothing burger. All right, stepping away before I keep getting mad. My next card is my second land in the rare set, and it is Shifting Woodland. It is the green land, so it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest. It taps for a green, and then it has the Delirium keyword. So if you have Delirium, you can pay 2 and a green. There's no tap involved in this, just 2 and a green. For the effect, Shifting Woodland becomes a copy of target permanent card in your graveyard until end of turn. Activate only if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. So the activation clause is literally just restating what Delirium is. You don't really have to worry about that. It is superfluous. Really, you just care about the fact that it requires 1 green and 2, because you just tap this for a green. This doesn't require a tap. And then you make a copy of anything in your graveyard. And it took people about 2 seconds to really figure out what they wanted to be doing with this card. There was no going into the tank. It was immediate. And it seemed like the camps were either, I'm a copy Dark Depths and just make a Merit Lage, or like every blue mage, what do you want to do? Everything. So I'll copy Omniscience and then just vomit my hand onto the table. And that was it. That was the amount of tanking it took. Between the two, we'd solved the card. It was ridiculous to see. And honestly, that kind of seems like the floor for this card. The ceiling is who knows what. But it is a little difficult to set up. It requires Delirium and something useful in the graveyard, which is easy. There are ways to tutor directly to the graveyard. Trying to set up Delirium while you're doing that can be difficult if you want to use a setup card like Intuition or Gifts Ungiven, because with Intuition, you get 3 copies of the same card. Easy. So you put 1 Dark Depths or 1 Omniscience in hand and 2 into the graveyard, but those 2 only count for 1 card type for Omniscience, a land and an enchantment respectively. If you Gifts, you can get 4 different. I mean, you're realistically just going to get 2 to put them in the graveyard, and that will be Dark Depths and anything else, or Omniscience and anything else. And at least you're halfway, 3/4 because of Gifts to Delirium, a land and you got there. Gifts is probably the easier way to set this up, other than Omniscience. Intuition can just be a little more reliable sometimes. So when you're looking at Legacy, it is probably the easiest to set up there. In Modern, it's a little more difficult. At the end of the day, we have some really powerful options in both formats, just about the same thing. With that being the floor, the sky being the limit. I don't know where this card goes, but for how interested people were when it was spoiled and where it is now, I think we're at an appropriate hype level. People aren't focused on this card right now for Modern because it's not the newest, shiniest thing. But they haven't forgotten about it either. And I think that's where this card exists. If you play Modern, if you play Legacy, you should have this card in your collection if you play decks that just are purely degenerate. You can make a copy of any permanent. You could be playing Storm, make a copy of an LED or a Lotus in Vintage, and just boop it back in. Like, just sack the Shifting Woodland for 3 mana. Awesome. This card can do so much. It is unexplored. People are not forcing it, but they are very aware of it. I think the price tag is a little overstated. We bottomed out at 5 over the weekend. It's now heading back up to 7. I think that's a little much for a card that just seems to be commander-driven right now. But overall, I think the interest in this card is exactly where it needs to be.
Yeah, this is one that when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
It's obviously... people will try to abuse this card in whatever way they can, and my first thought was EDH, obviously getting the extra consistency and resiliency, because if you have a key combo piece or key value piece in the graveyard, you just get it back.
Yeah.
Then I was like, well, wait a second. Even though it's mana negative, that doesn't always matter in Storm. Mm-hmm. You just need the extra spell count, so you get your LED or you get your Omniscience in the case. Yeah, whatever the case is. But it gives you extra casts and it gives you extra reach with those decks and resiliency. And I think that's one of the key things about this is that this did kind of, it gives you those things and it did kind of disappear amidst all the other hype around the set, which I think is part of problem of sets like this, is there's a lot of cards, and maybe that's a good thing, there's a lot of opportunity because of that to find things that are a little bit undervalued and go from there. So that's the one that I was very excited about this card when it got spoiled.
Yeah,
I still very pleased with the price point it's at, because to me, this is not, I mean, I'm not saying, it'll ever be a $20 card, but I could certainly see, the regular versions getting to where the borderless version is now at like $8 to $10.
Yeah, I think that's,
that
like
I
I
could
said,
see.
I think that's a fine price point in time. I think for where we are right now, it's just a little too high based on the zero adoption.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, last card. Bring it on.
So yes, my last card. I'm going to keep this one brief because I'm going to touch on it again next week. I won't tell you why though. And that is Guide of Souls. 1 white mana for a 1/2. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life and get an energy. Great. It generates energy. I don't think we had permanent ways to do that in Aether Revolt outside of maybe
Puzzle
Gonti's.
Puzzle Knot. That was it.
Wood Reaver Puzzle Knot. That was it. Whenever you attack, you may pay 3 energy. When you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters and a flying counter on target attacking creature. It becomes an angel in addition to its other types. So this is a card that is currently sitting at $5, which is insanely high for this. But this is a $10 card eventually. This card will see so much play in casual EDH. This card is so good for your tokens lists, your counters list, your dice factory, whatever. This is a card that I expect long term to just have insane potential in EDH for finance. It is also, anecdotally, probably the best fucking card in the set for limited. This card's insane in limited. Pack one, pick one all day. I'll splash for this card. That has nothing to do with finance, but it's also 2 relevant tribes, human and cleric. That's good for it. And the fact that it is not only the second permanent source of energy, but it is a source of energy that is also an outlet, means that you don't even have to give it any support other than itself. And that, I think, has been one of the big problems with a lot of mechanics that have come around lately, is outside of Initiative and Monarch, energy especially suffered from the problem of needing all-in support for it to work.
Yep. We went over this in the Fallout set.
Yeah, exactly. And it needs all-in support. And now there is a card that doesn't require all-in support for energy to work. And I think that is huge for its viability in casual EDH. Because outside, if you take the energy symbol away from these things, and you just make it like you get 1 life and 1 colorless. When you attack, you can pay 3 colorless and put the counters. That's still completely playable.
Yeah.
Now you put a bad mechanic with it, and a lot of people immediately think, oh, that's unplayable because that mechanic is trash. No, it's very good. It is very, very good. I think this card sees, and I will say this, I don't think it ever sees play in a 60-card format. It's just EDH for this card for me. But I think this is, wake up in a year and a half, holy shit, when did Guide of Souls become $10 to $15? Because it was sitting in bulk for so long, and nobody realized its slow rise. So I love it.
No, I like this card as well, but for reasons you didn't touch on. So I don't think the becomes an angel in addition to its other type is going to be that relevant for Commander. No. At the moment, I have heard musings of, but I'm pretty sure most of them are jokes, of Soul Sisters with 16 sisters.
Yep.
But the reality is, you can reconfigure that deck to actually close now because of Guide of Souls.
Yep.
You just want to gain a lot of life in that deck. So this could be Soul Sisters, 5 through 8, and then you can relegate. I forgot whichever one's the bad one, not Soul Warden, the one that costs 2.
Suture Priest.
No, that's reverse. I can't remember. I don't play that deck. I dislike it. It to priests, 9 through 12, right? And this allows you to pick up a bit of energy just from playing creatures, which is exactly what you want to do, or making a bunch of tokens because it's when they enter. You don't have to cast. You just make a bunch of energy, and then you can start stacking on your little shitters, and they'll become 3/3 flyers, so you can close the game out that way. Or, because now you have access to so many, quote, Soul Sisters, unquote, you can just play Aetherflux Reservoir and natty boop somebody out of the game for 50, right? Yeah. So we saw Jody Keith at the RC in Denver, the Leyline of the Guild Pact 5-color Rhino RC, float to the top with Soul Sisters. I believe he took too many losses to top 8. He didn't bubble out. But when people see that deck do well, they generally tend to gravitate. And I think this is a card that has the opportunity to bring more eyes to that archetype because you get to reconfigure it.
Yep.
Do I think it will do well? No, because Chalice on 1, I think, basically ends this deck, and that is a very real thing that could be done. And it is just kind of pretty mopey overall, so if you're fast enough, you can just get under it. You can just deal too much damage, but if it's given time to set up, it can very well win a long game.
Yeah.
So I will challenge we won't see it in 60. I'm pretty sure Soul Sisters can now basically be relegated to that every player on the planet lends their energy to the one person at the event, and then they top 8, similar to every Merfolk player on the planet.
Yep.
And I think this becomes that same kind of deck where it has a card like this will now have a price tag because there's a dedicated deck around it. There's a dedicated group of players that are interested in it. It has commander playability behind it. It is a weird energy card that we'll probably never see again. Whether it is over or underpowered as an energy card doesn't matter. We don't really seem to get a lot of them. And at the end of the day, everything about this card, from a creature type standpoint, is relevant down the line. And this is a card that can have a lot of weird demand behind it, a lot of kind of slow, invisible demand behind it. That does make it a $10 or $15 card years down the line without having to put up good constructed results. Just enough to give some people hope that maybe Soul Sisters can still be their pet deck. Otherwise, I agree with everything. I'm just challenging the constructed portion of this. Because,
I guess there we could see it. I like to forget that Soul Sisters is a deck because I just run mono removal decks. And that's just a buy. But yeah,
exactly.
That's fair.
Or Skullcrack is a very real card. Enjoy the no life gain, that kind of stuff too. There are ways around it that generally push it down. But there are those people that love that kind of deck. People still play Martyr of Sands.
True.
Which goes in the Soul Sister deck, but maybe not anymore. We don't know. We don't know how it's going to shake out. But at the end of the day, Guide of the Souls is a real card. It has real demand. Card Kingdom has been showing this on their hot list for 2 weeks now. It is very much a card that people are interested in. So yeah, absolutely. I think the hype on this is perfectly fine. I don't think it's overhyped, underhyped. I think it's just right down the middle. And I don't think into the future it'll be any less relevant than it is right now. So I like it overall. But that is going to be it for this episode. 3 cards each. And then next week we'll be back to basically discuss Modern Horizons 3, its impacts.
The fallout. Yeah.
If you want to talk about it that way. Impacts at the LGS level, what we saw pre-release weekend from the stores we were at, and just, the future state of Horizon sets. Yeah. And, hopefully what we're going to see in the game. So for at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Halt, I am Reptar. You are?
At Damon_Thurston.
We'll see you next week.